Nice to meet you all.
So
We
I
got there in the end.
suppose, yeah, we met through SGE. So this is like a
Mm.
thing, and then you become a big advocates and fans of Ask Bosco. So I suppose, how and when did it start? When did you start playing with it? I don't want to steal content from what you're going to go into, but what was the sort of, and I suppose, how excited or scared should we be?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So Google started testing it, I think May last year, which was we were playing with it within a day of its announcement. Google launched it in Search Labs. So it's like a sort of a testing laboratory for people who are really into this type of stuff to go and play with it. As soon as I had a play with it, I thought, right, this is potentially really impactful for brands. The fact that you get a different set of websites a lot of the time, ranking in SGE to what you get in the regular organic results, meant that this was something that we had to figure out, and we were determined to figure out what the ranking factors were. There was no information about how to rank in SGE. Actually, there still isn't really that much public information at all. We were the first people to share our method for ranking in it, and that just came from literally weekends and evenings over most of last year, just prodding at this thing and playing with it, testing hypothesis to see what works. How scared should we be? It's really difficult to tell because we don't know what sort of impact this is going to have on traffic yet. We're saying to people, be sort of pretty cautious about this because if they do roll it out in its current state, it's going to have some significant impact. We don't yet know what, but I think we just all need to be ready for this. We need to know how it works. We need to know how to rank in it really. And then if Google does roll it out, then we got this covered.
And if you're a betting man, based on what you've seen,
Mm.
why wouldn't they roll it out? Or is it a high percentage chance? What's your sort of gut feel or professional thought now?
I think it's incredibly gameable. Some of the demos I'm going to show you today show just how gameable it is. So there will be a concern there. I also think they're going to have a real backlash from publishers about some of the content that's being taken from publishers' websites. We can go into this later on if it's of interest to people, but Google's public take on how SG works, actually, I don't think is accurate. I don't think it is, in fact, looking for websites that corroborate the information in the answer. I think it is actually scraping and rewriting. So I think there's a legal question there. There's also a question of cost, how much it's going to cost to serve SG results. But I actually think this is one of those products that they'll have to roll out because the competition from ChatGPT, for example, will be so significant. I think investors are going to have questions if Google doesn't have a sort of a competitive product. And we might start seeing search behavior migrate over to Perplexity and ChatGPT instead, which would be much more dangerous for Google. So I think they're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place, and they're going to probably have to launch an imperfect product.
And I think we talked about it before, is the thought is that they're going to start monetizing it and placing
Mm,
ads, a bit like Bing sort of do. What have
mm.
you seen? What's your thoughts on that? What have you seen
Yeah.
already listing?
So another one of my hobbies is listening to Google shareholder and investor calls, and each quarter from Q2 last year all the way to Q4, which is our most recent one, they've talked about how they're testing new ways to advertise inside SGE. I've seen zero tests of ads inside SGE. Actually, we're now seeing ads on top of SGE, so basically just regular Google ads, then SGE, then the rest of the search page. That to me is an admission that they haven't managed to figure out how to integrate the ad products with SGE yet. I don't think they're going to roll it out unless there are ads on that page. And the fact that they are now testing it with ads on top, I think means they're pretty much ready to go with that. So I think that's what we're going to see initially. And then maybe over time, like you mentioned, how Bing Chat is like their version of SGE, and they were testing sponsored links inside the inside the Bing Chat results. I think that's the most logical implementation, but I haven't seen that yet. So who
Yeah.
knows? Who knows where they're at with those tests?
Yeah. And so if any of you've got questions for Tim, just fire them into the Q&A or into the chat. We do have the Ask Bosco support team sort of queuing up all the different questions. But I suppose, do you want to go through some of fire up your deck and go through sort of some of the findings and give the real life examples of what we've seen? Because I think when the first time we looked at this with you guys, that really brought it to life to me. And I do agree with you. This is open to abuse.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to. Can you all see the screen that I've got here?
Yeah,
I've got a few slides.
perfect.
Great. So yeah, just a bit of background on me. I've founded Exposure Ninja. We're a digital agency mainly specializing in SEO, content marketing, PPC, and web. I'm also now buying agencies. So if you've got an agency you're really fed up with, then hit me up on LinkedIn. We share everything that we learn mainly through our book, which is one of the best-selling SEO books, and also our YouTube channel, which is one of the most popular agency YouTube channels. And we share loads of stuff about SGE on there because I think it's really important that agencies and brands are sort of familiar with this thing. Google's given us a good old sort of lead up into when it's going to be launched. So it's up to us to be prepared for this. I think the fact that it's been in testing mode now for almost a year, no one really has an excuse not for being prepared for SGE. I just actually wanted to start with a little bit of a survey just to understand where we were all at with SGE and what our sort of understanding was. So if you've used SGE, if you've actually tried it out, if you could just drop a 1 in the chat. If you've heard of SGE, but you haven't used it, then just give me a number 2. And if you've not heard of it at all, if this is the first time, then just drop me a 3. This is really useful to sort of gauge the level of awareness of it. Okay, so we've got some 2s, we've got some 3s. Fantastic. Okay, mostly 2s and 3s. Right, great. So mostly people who either haven't heard of it or they've heard of it, but they haven't played with it. And then we've got a couple of, actually just one person, Dan. Congrats, Dan, for the only person who's actually tried it out. Great. So I'll give a bit of a summary of what SGE is, what it looks like, how it all works. Then we'll look at some case studies, so examples of websites which weren't ranking in SGE, and then what we did to get them ranking in SGE. I can then talk through the exact process that we've used. And then we should have some time for Q&A, and if anybody's got any observations or questions, then feel free to stick them in as we go, and I can answer them as I see them, or we can wait to the end. Great. So yeah, SGE I think is a pretty huge change to Google search. If you search on Google today, we're all pretty familiar with a Google search results page. We've got basically a featured snippet. This is an informational search. We've got a featured snippet up at the top, which tells us that this is an informational search. The featured snippet obviously is text that's taken from a web page and presented on the page of Google, right? And the sort of trade that we make as brands in order to have our content shared directly in the Google search page is that we get that link. That link is the sort of explicit or implicit trade that we're making with Google. Then the rest of this page is, we've got some people also ask accordions. If you click on these, again, you see answers, but these are taken from websites and linking to the website that provides that copy. Then we've got the regular organic results and various other search furniture as well. So this is the Google search page that we're all familiar with. Of course, there are different variations, but this is mainly what we're working with. SGE looks pretty different. So here's an SGE result for actually the, I think it's the same search. So you can see this whole section up at the top here. This is produced by Google's generative AI. So this is a little bit like ChatGPT, right? I've typed in a question, what is a page title? And the generative AI has produced an answer. Now, we still have some websites linked. We've got these websites in a carousel on the right-hand side, and you can see we've got these little drop-down arrows. And if you click on any of those, you'll see more websites linked. Websites which corroborate the information in each part of this answer. So you'll see there's basically a drop-down arrow after every paragraph. Although, I have to say, this is the version of what SGE looked like a little while ago, but we're actually now seeing SGE without the carousel. So it looks like Google has changed it and is testing SGE without the carousel. All the rest of the regular search page is still there, but it's now forced below the fold on desktop. So this is the above the fold section on desktop. So if you're ranking position 1 on regular organic results and you're used to getting all of that juicy traffic, well, you can now see that there's something that's potentially taking that traffic. And like I say, this now we're seeing since sort of mid to end February, we're seeing SGE without the carousel, without that section on the right-hand side. Now, if you do that search today, this is what you see. So we've lost the carousel. We've now got these websites in the drop-down section. This is open by default. So obviously, if we want to get traffic from this search, if we're used to taking traffic from this search by being ranked in the regular organic results, the name of the game now is to make sure that we are being found in these links here. This is the only way that we're going to get web traffic. Actually, there is another way, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Because if we're relying on the old way of ranking, then potentially that is a bit under threat. This exists even for branded search. So here's an example of somebody searching Exposure Ninja. And you can see we've got this entire SGE section up at the top of the page here. All of this is generative AI. So whereas previously, this is the search result that you would have seen. You would have seen the Google listing on the right, and you would have seen organic results on the left. Now at the top of this page, you're seeing this massive generative AI produced section. It links to other websites. It pulls images from Google Business. It's even pulling reviews from different other third-party websites as well. You can see you can click on any of these to have a look at the websites that this information is corroborated on or taken from. But you can also ask follow-up questions. So you can actually chat with the search results, and Google's SGE will answer your question and again link to more. So here someone's just searched Exposure Ninja podcast as a follow-up question and are now seeing links from all of these podcast links, and they can follow up. They can search Exposure Ninja pricing. Now, this is one of the limitations of an LLM powered search. Someone's just searched Exposure Ninja pricing and it's taken out some completely wrong information from a blog post that we wrote about SEO tools, and it's sharing that in the search results. And this is one of the limitations of an LLM based search, is that accuracy isn't always guaranteed. There are ways around this, which we will talk about later if we have time. But you can see that this isn't just this isn't just commercial search. This isn't just informational search. This is potentially going to be appearing for your branded search as well. So it's really important that we have a handle on it and we have, I guess, some control or some influence over the SGE results that are showing up. Fundamentally, I'm seeing this as a pretty massive change from Google. Their goal has been, historically, Google's goal has been to show the websites that have the most relevant and useful information. Well, now Google is trying to answer the searcher's query directly in the search results, and the websites are almost of secondary importance, right? Whereas a featured snippet, this is information that's very clearly taken from a particular website. With SGE, that line is blurring a little bit. We need to figure out what this means, and we need to figure out what the impact is going to be. Now, because this has been in testing mode, there's not much data around how much traffic could be lost or gained because of SGE. So a bunch of agencies have sort of tried to guess. Here's one of the early studies conducted by Agile SEO, which is an Israeli SEO firm. And what they did is they basically made some assumptions and some projections about the impact of SGE on organic traffic. They mapped out these 4 scenarios and estimated that on average, sites would lose between 18 and 64% of their organic traffic with SGE rolling out. Now, within that was the average. Within that, there were some sites that actually gained, in some cases doubling their organic traffic, and there were some sites that lost, in one case actually losing 95% of their organic traffic. Now, personally, I think that the assumptions that they've made in this study were a little aggressive, a little pessimistic. I don't think the impact is going to be that severe myself. I think maybe we might be looking at about half this. But even so, as a best case scenario, losing 10% of your traffic to SGE is not great. So we obviously need to figure out how to, I guess, manipulate these rankings for fun and profit. So what are the sort of search terms and businesses that are going to be most impacted? I think what we're going to see is a drop in informational organic traffic. So questions like how, why, where tend to bring up SGE results a lot of the time. And clearly Google is trying to, keep that search inside the search results without visitors necessarily having to go to web pages. So we might see a drop there, particularly if we're not ranking. I think we'll also move to a place where more of our customers' research happens on Google. I think about a search like, let's say that you're going to buy a new phone. You might initially start your search trying to work out whether you should go, Apple or Android. Then you might choose a particular model. You might do some research about that particular model. Then you might look at different size variations. You might look at some of the features of one model against another. If you think that research journey probably has 5 to 6 different searches in, and then each of those searches is maybe 5 different website visits, you're potentially looking at 25 to 30 website visits there that Google is trying to sort of squish into happening actually in the search results page. So I think Google's goal is for more of the customers' research happen on Google, because obviously they can then serve ads. And a great question John asked is about monetization. I think long term, it will make sense for Google to be able to integrate Performance Max into the search results page, because then you can target people at the start of the funnel, middle of the funnel, whatever, and you can sort of influence them along that journey. This could mean fewer of top of funnel visitors for organics. And this will give some brands doubts over their content strategy. For example, if Google's just going to be eating all my traffic, what's the point of even publishing anymore? Right. I think that doubt is misplaced. I actually think SEO and content is going to be more important in this SG world, but we'll come on to that in just a bit. Undoubtedly, though, there's going to be a lot of fear about this. And I think as we'll do some of the examples, you'll see that some of the old guard who are ranking well in regular organic results aren't set up to rank well in SGE. And this will be a huge opportunity for websites and brands who maybe haven't been ranking so well to rank really well in SGE, steal more of that traffic, and actually use this as an opportunity to grow. Thinking back to that ranking analysis, that traffic analysis study, there were sites there that gained traffic as a result of SGE. So this is all about learning how to manipulate SGE and figure out how to get your website showing. So that is our goal. There has been some speculation about Google sort of not really rolling it out. They were supposed to be testing it until the end of December. Then we thought it was going to be rolled out, and then it wasn't. So a lot of people at that point thought, right, SGE is dead. We don't have to worry about this. I think that is a pretty sketchy assumption to make. Sundar has said, over time, this will be just how search works. We are building the next major revolution in search. And they've been incredibly bullish. He's been incredibly bullish personally in each of their shareholder investor quarterly calls about this. So I think his reputation is sort of tied to the rollout of SGE. So I think we are going to see it. When it was supposed to finish testing mode in December, this was extended. No deadline was given. In February 2024, SGE stopped being only available on desktop, and they started testing it on mobile. And it started to actually be visible on Android devices. In March, it stopped being only available on Google browsers and started being visible on Safari. Some Android users were offered SG without signing up in testing mode as well. And then actually either last week or the week before, the BBC published a story about SG being rolled out in the UK for some people. So some people were seeing it even if they weren't signed up to the Labs program. So all the signs point to Google collecting more and more user data about this, which looks like a launch is coming. We don't know when, but it looks like it is coming. Okay, the other sort of terrifying concept, or the thing that people say every time there's a big change in search, is that SEO is dead. I remember my hero at the time, Chris Cardell, saying this, and I was thinking, oh, this is really bad news, Chris. I've got an SEO agency. This is really devastating. But you know, he said this in 2011, and SEO is obviously not dead. Every time there's a change in search, then everyone says SEO is dead. I think SEO is just evolving. SGE requires a new approach to SEO, but as long as there is a search engine, there will be search engine optimization. That's what I wrote in our first edition of How to Get to the Top of Google, and it's the exact phrase that we use in today's edition. This is just a different type of criteria that we need to optimize for. Okay, so how do we win in SGE? Well, there are 4 ways to win, really. Here is a search for what is CAS Accreditation UK. So CAS Accreditation is a construction accreditation scheme. We work with a client, CHAS, and they are the link that's there. So when you search for this is the, this is a search page that shows up, and CHAS are the first website linked here. So obviously in this sort of scenario, yes, they're ranking #1 organically for this search. We've worked on that for years with them. They were one of maybe 5 websites that was visible above the fold. Now they are one of 1 website that's visible above the fold. So the first way to win is to get featured in that section at the top of the page. The second way to win in SGE is actually SGE will recommend particular brands. So here you can see it talking about some companies that have recognized CAS. And SG is happy to answer questions like, what is the best X, or can you recommend the best Y? And it will give recommendations of those brands. So that's the second way to win, is to actually have SG do your selling for you. The third way to win is, you can see the search here is what is CAS accreditation. We've done so much content marketing for CHAS, which is a client, about CAS, that Google now seems to see these entities are slightly linked. So when you search for what is CAS accreditation, it's actually suggesting, as follow-up questions, what does CHAS stand for and CHAS accreditation? So this is a little like, if you're working at Dyson and someone searches for what is the best Hoover or what is the best vacuum cleaner, actually, then SGE says, wait, do you mean Dyson? Or where is Dyson based? Or what's the best Dyson? So you can actually sort of, we haven't done this intentionally, but there's been some sort of link there between the entities in Google's large language model so that it's actually thinking, okay, do you mean this? And then that's a kind of interesting avenue to explore further as well. Then, of course, there will be a PPC offering. At the moment, we're seeing Google Ads show up above SGE for some of the searches. We're expecting them to build it in at some point. We just haven't seen too much of that yet. And then, of course, in some people are still seeing the carousel. So the carousel is the other way to win. These carousel links are just taken from the drop downs. So usually if you're linked in the first drop down, you've got a better chance of showing up in one of the first few slots in the carousel if it's showing up for you. Okay, can we influence SGE? Here are a few case studies. Do feel free to drop any questions or observations you got as we go. I'm going to show you some case studies. These are mainly from the Exposure Ninja website because I was just playing around with this. Hacking it meant I didn't need to get any client approvals or anything like that. We have started testing it with clients as well. I'll show you some client examples too. But I'm mainly just using the Exposure Ninja website for these tests because you can make changes very quickly, which it turns out is really important for SGE. Okay, so in this search, the search is what is a page title, and in the before state, so when SGE was first sort of released, Exposure Ninja wasn't ranking for SGE at all. No visibility for SGE. We had no featured snippet. So this is Campaign Monitor down here. They've got the featured snippet. Interestingly, Campaign Monitor had the featured snippet, but they weren't in SGE, which is one danger, right? You've got some nice visibility here, but then in the new world, you're nowhere. Exposure Ninja was ranking position 8 in organic, so basically a million miles down the page now that SGE is there. We wanted to know if we could get ranked, and it turns out that we absolutely could. So after a bit of tweaking and optimization, not only got ranked position 1 in the carousel, but linked throughout the SGE answer. And managed to do this within about 5 hours. Which was kind of interesting. Then SGE actually changed. One of the things that you'll notice if you play with SGE is it's a lot more dynamic than regular search results. The answers can change, and when the answers change, you sometimes need to change the optimization in order to get that ranking back. So Google changed the SGE answer and actually dropped the carousel for this search. We lost our slot, but we re-optimized the page and got ranking back within 6 hours. And you can see we're now open in the corroboration link there. So with whereas with regular organic results, you might have to optimize for it. You might get some visibility and you might keep that visibility for months. With SGE, you can pick up visibility really quickly. Like 5-6 hours seems to be about as fast as you can do it. But you can also lose visibility if Google changes what SGE, how SGE's answer is presented for that search, which means you've then got to go and re-optimize to get that back. So it's a bit more dynamic. It's a bit more hard work, to be honest. But that very fast feedback loop is really useful and means that it's you can tell very quickly if the work you're doing makes a difference. Okay. Are there any signals that...
John,
Yes,
a couple of questions
John.
coming, and I'm now in the situation where I can't turn my camera back on, but I'll just ask you questions. So I don't know what's going on with Zoom today. Yeah, one of them was, well, you could just read them and then read them out and answer them. I think they're both quite interesting at the point we're at now.
Yes. Does this solve the problem of cookie data accepts decline on websites? I now search on ChatGPT because it irritates me to click on a website, decline the cookie collection to get to the content. Yes. LLM avoids this annoyance, thus I'm not viewing Google ads. Yeah, that's a great question, James. Yes, potentially. I think there is a big question here about how many people actually click through an SGE answer to the underlying website to see if they want more context. And whether the user experience just staying in SGE, like you've said about ChatGPT, is actually better than visiting a website. In which case, as marketers, we need to think about how we are influencing the SGE answers to recommend our brands. Otherwise, we're just providing free information to Google. Josh says, are there any signals that are provided that could help you ascertain if the click came via an SGE answer versus other organic paid links from the SERP? Great question. To my knowledge, we don't see anything in Search Console yet that explains whether it's an SGE answer or a regular organic answer. For a time, SGE, when it linked to a website, there was a hash at the end of the link. And if you went into the landing page section on GA4, you could actually see that you were getting traffic to the landing page with the hash. So you could work out that actually that was an SGE click. But SGE doesn't seem to do that anymore. It seems to have dropped that. So yeah, back to invisibility again. But I expect once they roll this out, this is going to be something that you see in Search Console, so you can see where that traffic is coming from. Okay. Now, interestingly, in our tests, the methods that we've been using to rank in SGE actually seem to work pretty well in Bing Chat as well. So this is Bing's version. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Bing, but Bing Chat is like Bing plus ChatGPT, and it works slightly differently. I think it works exactly the same, but Bing and Google say it works slightly differently. And when we optimized our page for this search in SGE, we noticed that we were now referenced in 6 out of the 7 links in Bing Chat and had the #1 website link there as well. So it seems to be using a similar sort of method to collect and rank the information. Okay, another example, in this case, the phrase, the search sponsored tag. Again, we had no visibility in SGE. We had #1 organic. We also had a featured snippet sometimes for this as well, but no visibility in SGE. So this is a sort of worst case scenario where you're doing well in the old world, but doing horribly in the new world. Well, with a bit of optimization, we managed to get carousel ranking and linked in the SGE answers. And then when Google changed and removed the carousel, we actually picked up position 1 in the sort of corroborating links. I don't really know what to call that section. And again, this happened in a matter of hours. So we made a few changes, tested them, didn't work, made a few more changes, tested them, worked, we got the visibility. So what are we actually doing here? How is this working? Well, what I noticed is SGE likes to draw from content that is towards the top of the page on the pages that it's referencing. And it also, I noticed that it seemed to prefer to link to content that was very simply written and using very like a high readability score. So very straightforward sentences. I noticed, for example, that you tended to get a very simple sentence structure where there's like one concept per sentence. I tend to write in very long, wordy sentences with massive overuse of commas, like, one sentence per paragraph thing. SGE doesn't dig that. SGE likes really simple sentences for some reason. So what we did is we tested restructuring the content on the page. How you'd normally start a blog post, like what is a sponsored tag, would be, the history of the world, right? So we start every blog post with the history of the world. Sponsored content is a type of marketing where you do this, and a sponsored tag, read on to find out exactly what a sponsored tag is. SGE doesn't really dig this. SGE digs stuff that's like, all right, what is a sponsored tag? Here's what a sponsored tag is. Bosh, there you go. That type of thing seems to work better. So built a bit of a hypothesis that was just basically if we added short summaries of these blog posts to the top of the blog post, we could have a decent chance of ranking in SGE. Now, there's a bit more to it than that, because if you think about it, you actually want to get ranked at the start of the SGE answer. Okay, because if you get ranked at the start of the SGE answer, it means you're going to be visible when the SGE answer opens. If you're, let me just go back. If you're like one of these links here, people may not even see your website. So you really want to be like right up here. So what you basically need to do is summarize this opening statement on your website in very straightforward, plain language at the top of the page, and then optimize the page for the search that you're targeting. You then need to force reindexing through Search Console. That's really important. If you don't do that, it just doesn't seem to work. But if you do that, usually you can rank within a matter of hours. If you don't rank within a matter of hours, what you need to do is go back, re-optimize, have a look at the intro content, re-optimize for that phrase, those phrases again, rewrite, use shorter sentences, more simple concepts, whatever, and just keep trying. Beck asked a great question there. How often does Google change the answer and what causes it to change the answer? It's a great question, Beck. I'm not sure what causes it to change the answer. It can change maybe, I don't know, some of the ones we've optimized for, they haven't changed at all. Some of them have changed maybe a few times in a month. What you'll sometimes notice is that Google starts adding different types of media to the answer. Now, I guess it's just testing to see what people find most useful. So in the previous version, I think it was the page title one, you saw it actually added an image to the SG answer. And when it did that, it then changed the whole formatting of the search. So it could be that they're updating the underlying large language model. It could be that they're tweaking, you know, the format of the answers. It could just be that they're testing, they've added a bit of random different media types and see what people engage with most before they roll it out. Does schema have an impact? Great question, Tom. No, doesn't appear to. Okay, another example. This is Shein marketing strategy. We would like to break down the marketing strategies of all sorts of businesses, including Chinese IP stealing fast fashion bandits, Shein. And in this case, we had no visibility at all, but we managed to get position 1 and in the carousel and maintain this as they changed the answer as well. So this is another one of those blogs, another one of those posts where if you're writing a typical post about Shein's digital marketing strategy, you would start with some introduction to Shein and, you know, this is the history of the business and they're growing very quickly, blah, blah, blah. But that's not what you need to do for SG. What you need to do for SG is say, right, Shein's marketing strategy is basically aggressive pricing, discount codes, use of sales, scarcity, hype on social media and TikTok, right? So it's a very different type of writing for this thing. And then, of course, you'd still have the rest of your content underneath if people want to dig in and find out a bit more information. But it's about having that summary right at the top of the page. Okay, we've also done this for clients, and in both cases, actually in less than a day. This is one of our clients. They sell amazing business, actually. They sell like fertilizers and stuff to take your lawn from looking like a horrible sort of scrubland to looking like a golf course. And the business is called Golf Course Lawn. Fantastic company, fantastic guy who runs it. We got them ranked position 1 for best seed to grow grass in less than a day. And they had absolutely no visibility before this. Best fungicides for lawns, same deal. Actually, this search has changed. If we've got time, I think we're running a little bit short on time, but if we've got time, we can look at the new version of this search. It's kind of interesting.
I think we can carry on if people want to stay on, as long as you've got time. I've got time.
Cool. Yeah, I've got a bit of time. Okay, cool. In fact, let me just show you an example of this search then. This is going to go slightly off piece potentially, but right. How do I get this showing? I think I need to share a different screen. It's not working. All right, forget it. You know what? We'll do that at the end. But basically, so what Google has done with this search now is best fungicides for lawns. It's actually showing product listings. So it's got a whole bunch of product listings. And in cases where
we can't see your slides anymore.
Oh, you can't see my slides anymore. Great. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
I suddenly turned my screen sharing back on. Let me just make you host again.
Oh, this is
classic.
great.
Two regular podcasters and webinar people can't even run their own. Let's see. Right. Can you try now?
Yeah. At least it's not kicking me out, right? Okay, there we go.
Yeah, perfect.
Super duper. Right. So yeah, in this search, Google's actually now got product listings here. And they're not Google shopping listings. They're actually from its organic product catalog. I can't remember what it's called, but there's like a product library that Google maintains where it pulls in all information about, you know, how many items are in stock and pricing and all that stuff. And that's what it's showing here. Now, in cases where it's recommending products in the SG answer, we're still seeing the carousel. So it's almost like it's catering for two different intents here. There's the commercial intent. If you actually just want to buy something, you can click on a product. But if you want more information, then you can go to the carousel. So that's just another example.
Turn into like Google Performance Max product ads.
Potentially. I mean, that would be the most logical, explanation, right? You'd have some regular organic product listings, and then you might have some sponsored listings at the top. Same with local businesses, right? You know how you've got the local ads, and when you search, particularly in the US, if you're searching like personal injury lawyer, you'll see a bunch of organic listings, and then you'll see like recommended, verified, or sponsored local ads at the top. So I think that would be a really straightforward way for Google to do this. I'm not sure why they haven't done that yet, but I think that could be where it's going, for sure. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to experiment with was, can we actually change SG's answers? Because sometimes SG is just plain wrong. And I'm doing a webinar for someone who works in corporate comms, and they work with lots of large brands who want to be able to influence a search over, let's say that you're Nestle, and someone asks, do you add sugar to baby milk? And there's an answer on the internet, and then there's your answer to that question. And SGE, can you influence those answers? Um, it turns out that actually you can. So in one of the searches that I was playing around with, just asking the very very humble question, how many books has Tim Cameron Kitchen written? And the SG answer was 5. It lists the same one 3 times. This is a pretty horrible answer as SG answers go. The same book is listed 3 times. And the answer is actually wrong because there are 2 more secret, terrible books that nobody knows about. I work very hard to make sure that nobody knows about them. So what I wanted to see is, could I actually change this answer? You can see that Google is getting the information for this answer from reputable sources like Audible, from Amazon, and from Exposure Ninja as well. So what I did is I wrote a new page on my, we've all got these trash personal websites that are really, basic and horrible, and nobody's touched them for years. Well, I've got one of those too. It gets no visibility. I don't promote it at all. No link building whatsoever. It has no real authority. But I noticed that Bing, when I asked Bing this question, it said the author's own website lists 7 books. So I thought that's interesting. Bing knows that my website has greater topical authority on me and my books than even these high authority external websites. So I wonder if Google knows the same. So I just wrote this short, trashy blog on my site that's sort of corrected it. And yes, we were able to change Google's answer within 5 hours. So the answer is now 7 books. And I did this just by, I'm calling these sort of things like exact match blogs or EMBs. And SG seems to respond quite well to exact blogs targeting the very question that you're trying to influence. Because if there's no single answer to this question online, if it's patching the answer together from different sources, it seems to be quite lazy in that if someone actually just gives it the answer, it's just going to trust that answer, especially if it's from a site that has high topical authority. So that was kind of interesting. And it seemed to work. And there was actually a few examples where I was able to get that working for various different questions. Now, I think that this, so going back to the question early on about what could stop this from being rolled out, if you look at Google's documentation, they always say that these websites are corroborating the information in the answer. Okay. The implication there is that Google's LLM, Google's AI, writes the answer, and then it goes to find websites which confirm that that is the case. This test for me shows that that is absolutely untrue. Google is actually running a background search, and it's scraping the information from the website and showing it in the search results as its own. Otherwise, how did I change that answer? Right? Does that make sense? Like, how can it be corroborating if I've just managed to change it? That shows that this isn't just like oh, by the way, these other websites agree with me. That means that the answer is actually coming from these websites and being presented, which, by the way, is exactly how Bing Chat works. And it's also how a load of these other sites like, Perplexity, similar sort of thing, running a web search in the background, then it's basically summarizing the answer and presenting that. This, of course, means that SEO is more important than ever because all of these tools are essentially parsing the query, running a web search on that query, and then just regurgitating the information, which means that if we can get ranking for those queries on the search results, we've got a good chance of being part of that regurgitation process. And if we have the right information on our pages, we then have a chance to influence the answer, which is exactly what's happened here. Okay, so how do you get SG rankings? Well, as we've looked at, the exact factors actually vary based on you and competitors, because the thing is, you need to be ranking well in organic results first. Just because you're ranking well in organic results doesn't mean that you're definitely going to get SG ranking, but in our tests, most of the time, it's the sites that are ranking well, which stand the best chance of ranking in SG once they've been optimized for SGE. So when we're working with this stuff on clients, we do page copy adjustments. We sometimes create new pages, the exact match blog thing. Of course, you need to build links if you don't have that visibility in the first place. On-site optimization is important to get the initial search ranking that you're then going to need to tweak and optimize to get visibility for SG. So that's where the question of schema might help. If you can get ranking in regular organic search because of some stuff that you're doing in schema, then that could be a good start. And of course, your metas will be important there. All right, what do we do with this? There's basically three responses to this that we've seen. First cohort of people is like, right, this is the future. I need to re-optimize my entire website for SGE. We're going to sweep through every page, drop everything else. We're going all in on this. I can understand why some people might do that in case Google decides to roll this out immediately. They don't want to lose any traffic. I think that's a little bit aggressive though, because SG does change and the answers do change. So the risk here is that you're doing that to optimize for a very small amount of initial SG traffic, and you might have to go and re-optimize later on anyway. The other approach is I'm going to pretend I didn't see this. Hopefully Google's just going to take SG out the back and shoot it because it's got some issues and it's easily gameable and it's got legal and privacy, blah, blah, blah. I think that's really dangerous as well. We've all got those friends who sort of tape over the warning lights on their cars. Bad call generally, as we saw back in the days of Panda and Penguin when we saw entire businesses getting wiped out by this. And we've actually seen with Helpful Content Update as well. We need to be on the front foot here. Here's the approach that we're taking and recommending with clients. Firstly, make sure your agency or SEO person understands SG. If you're a friend of Modo25, obviously they are thinking about SG. That is why we are all here together. So that's a good sign. We do this stuff for our clients as well. What we're doing with our clients is experimenting to see firstly which searches are bringing up SG results in their space. We're then optimizing some of their pages to make sure we can get ranking for those SG results. Once we've done that, we're like, cool, okay, when this thing rolls out, when Google gives us a launch date, we know that we can go through and sweep through the rest of the site to get you ranking. Okay, we know that we can do it. We know exactly what we need to do for your particular site in your particular industry. So that's cool. So we don't go crazy and re-optimize their entire website. We just say, right, we're comfortable, we've got that. If it comes to it, then we can go through and optimize. Okay, so that is what I've got for you, peeps. If you've got any questions, please sling them in the old chat. Okay, good luck on the school run.
We've got another one in from Ali, which has just come in the Q&A. How do you see this impacting the travel industry, and where the answers to queries would potentially lead back to the sort of individual places rather than people recommending them, like best restaurants in New York, for example?
Restaurants in New York. Okay. I've actually got two answers for this. So best restaurants in New York, that type of thing is going to typically bring up local results. The local results that we've seen in SG pretty much mirror the regular local results that you're seeing in organic search. So in that case, you're just going to optimize for local search. There are going to be, some of those searches are also going to bring up, recommendation websites or blogs or TripAdvisor and those things. So making sure you got some good visibility there is going to help you get visibility in SGE. The other thing that you can do, which seems to be working quite well in SG at the moment, is you see this a lot in software, where a local restaurant in New York will actually write a blog post on their site, best restaurants in New York. They're obviously going to be number one, and then they're going to list some other decent ones as well and explain why they're decent. And as long as that post isn't just complete, transparent trash, as long as there's some value to it, actually you can get ranking for that, and then that can start to influence the SGE answer. I've also been studying this type of search in ChatGPT to see what that's bringing up. And that's kind of interesting because what that tends to prioritize is blogs, and they are blogs rather than like TripAdvisor or more sort of dynamic directory type sites. So I think we may actually see, weirdly, I think if ChatGPT continues in that direction, we may actually see resurgence in like, mummy travel blogs and stuff like that. You get all these, Wandering Beavers 502, writing all of these blogs about, their travels in New York. And those types of sites seem to be pulling into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT seems to love that type of thing. So I think we might see a resurgence of that world and the whole guest posting bonfire that we all love.
And then
What,
what about
yeah,
one other one's coming about like product searches, particularly around fashion. Someone's asked like, what's the best polo shirt? And again, I suppose
yeah.
that's into interpretation. And potentially, I think in there is once someone's honed down on their searches for their polo shirt, is that's when the sponsored ads are going to come in, or the opportunity for Google to push and monetize.
Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, Google Shopping is going to be as important in the new world as it is in the old world. $162 billion of Google's annual revenue is like search ads. So they're not gonna neglect their advertisers. That will be the type of search that we'd expect to see product listings in the SG answer. Most of these will be organic. I think eventually they'll be sponsored. And there'll also be some carousel. There'll also be some content links there. So in organic search at the moment, you'd probably expect to see, Forbes or GQ or something like that with their best polo shirts posts. And those sorts of sites will still have some visibility in the SG carousel, but you'll also get products being featured
So,
there as
so
well.
it's looking at like the trusted publishers who've got reviews of certain things, but is it also looking at the review engines? And have you seen any review engines being pulled in? Because again, they've in the past been questioned about being manipulated. And is this going to
Yeah.
potentially people go, right, in order for me to rank in SG, I need to go and have a bazillion reviews, and then that. How have you seen review sites being featured in this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My personal experimentation, I've seen a lot more review sites being shown for things like Glassdoor. So if you search for like, is Amazon a great place to work? It'll pull and aggregate Glassdoor reviews, and it'll even take out some sentiment from those reviews and share in the search results. For this type of product search, not so many review sites. I mean, you do get some, but not so many really. It seems to be more like individual websites. I don't want to say individual perspectives because obviously Forbes isn't presented as one person's perspective, but it seems that those types of content sites seem to be better optimized for SGE. So for whatever reason, they're showing up more often. Yeah, I see if I can get my the other screen showing. So maybe I stop share and then new share. That might work. Yeah, here we go.
And for
Uh,
anybody on, if you want us to, so just for everybody's just complete transparency, Tim and his team have been training our team on all this. So that's sort of why we're sort of, so if you do want a sort of mini audit or any questions, just, we'll send a follow up after this and just reply to that, and we'll answer it or we'll get Tim and his team to answer it. But yes, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
yeah, absolutely. We do like an SG audit on our website too. But this is an example for one of those searches which is like a blended intent. So we've got best fungicides for lawns. So I'd say this is probably fundamentally as a product search, which is why we've got some of these organic results here being pulled from different sites. But then we've also got the carousel links here, and these are all content sites. So this is our client. You can see we've got them ranked first three positions there by absolutely just pummeling Google with there's so much content about this topic that we're sort of trying to snap up as many of these positions as possible. And then we've got these product listings, and then you've got the regular search. Obviously, he's ranking position one organically, but then you've got these sponsored ads here. So, like you're saying, John, I expect we'll see Google start to add some of these sponsored listings in here. I guess the question is whether
Which way
whatever
it goes,
mechanism is being used
yeah.
to recommend these, it's just like, do those sponsor pages have enough information to be able to show here? They're obviously going to need to meet that criteria as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, is there going to be a level of optimization of your product feed uh,
Mhm.
to see whether or not it starts coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, we're going to see people optimize. I mean,
That was quite
okay,
interesting just there. GQ, which was the sort of thing you were saying would rank for this, is.
yeah, yeah, but I mean, this for me is like this is a crap user experience. I don't know what you think, but we've got these content sites here, which is fine, but then look at the amount of products I'm being offered here. Like, it's just a horrible, horrible format for this. And I think this is one of the challenges with SGE. Something like this, which is much more scrollable, they're all nicely, they're a lot slimmer, so you have to do a lot less work to trawl through mountains of product listings. I think there's
And is
still
it
work to be
pulling
done.
that from the Google CSS?
This is what's the name? Is that is Google?
Comparison shopping. Yeah, the comparison
Is that
shopping
it?
listing. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that it's the organic thing it's separate to the your merchant feed. This is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
AI powered thing, which is why it shows like these products from different vendors. So yeah, but I think I've been looking at doing this webinar about what do you call it, like corporate comms and reputation management and stuff like this. I think these kinds of searches are going to be really interesting, a really interesting battleground to see who can influence these the most. And what I've found is that if you're in corporate comms, so let's say that you're, I don't know, is Nestle greenwashing, for example, you're going to get an answer here. If you're in this sort of world, the worst possible thing that you can do is not answer this question. So Nestle, ideally, I know they probably never will, but Nestle should have a page on their site which says, is Nestle greenwashing, or our response to greenwashing accusations, or something like that. Use this freaking keyword. Because if you don't, the entire narrative is taken up by other websites. And you are pumped down, down, and down the page. Your official response is nowhere. Whereas if you look at something like, I don't know, is BP net zero, what you'll probably see is, there we go, because they've written about net zero on their site, BP is being listed here. SGE trust this as the topical authority on this query, and gives their answer, even though obviously it's ridiculous for BP to be net zero. They're a fossil fuels company, but the fact that they've set this goal means that the answer isn't no, BP isn't net zero.
And
The answer is they've set the goal to become.
and then they're in control, and I think that's interesting.
They're in control.
Yeah, Bex just
Yeah.
answered. Well, yeah, we're going to wrap up in the next 2 minutes. So, but Beck just asked if you have to click generate, but where Tim's in the lab section. So what that then is doing is simulating what it will look at like in the future. And we're starting to see them where you don't have to generate. We're starting to see searches coming in up in the UK, and as Tim mentioned before, around the sort of who, why, what type questions. We know the ones we've been noticing in the office actually as statistics around football players and other things people are searching. It's generating those sorts of things. But when you click the generate button, that's basically saying this is how SGE will give the answer in the future or now, but it isn't necessarily publicly available if you're not in the test environment.
That's it. And I think what they're doing here is, some searches you'll see SGE visible by default. Some searches you'll see it that there's no option for SGE. So if you say like, is BP a good investment, you won't see an SGE answer at all. Yeah. And then some searches are in the middle area where they give you the generate button. And I think they're probably just looking at how many people click on that to understand whether an SGE answer would be a useful thing in this particular search or not.
Yeah. So I'd just like to thank you, Tim, for your time. A pleasure, as always. And we'll send around the recording. If any of you have got any other questions, just get in touch and we'll make sure you get the right answers and everything. But hopefully all those 2s and 3s at the beginning of the people who are now thinking, right, I need to actually go have a play with this or do something about it. And I think your recommendation is you don't sit there and do nothing. At least have a think about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speak to your internal SEO team, speak to Exposure Ninja, speak to Modo25, speak to AskBosco, or speak to your agency about what are they doing about it. So, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Tim, and I will speak to you soon.